So starting with our literal equations, we needed to solve them. So for number 7, get y by itself, we needed to subtract ax to both sides. Some of you were putting ax minus c. That can only go one way, so make sure you put that the right way. And then divide everything by b. So y equals c minus ax all over b was your final answer for that one. That was worth 2 points, one for solving and one for getting the correct answer. Do we have any questions on that one? Number 2, so this might be my mistake because a couple of you did this the second way we talked about. I think I may have misspoke when we did this in class. I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember exactly what I said. Some of you started multiplying by m, but that was incorrect because that would just give you m squared and it wouldn't simplify anything. You needed to divide both sides by b and then divide both sides by b. I think the problem we had before was d equals v over m, but I'm not 100% on that, which is why we multiplied 1 over m to both sides. And I know some of you were trying to do that here, so multiply this by 1 over m. Which would get rid of the m, yes, but v would still be in the denominator. So then you would have to cross multiply or still multiply by b. So you could have done it that way, but you still needed to continue to solve it. Questions on that one? Cameron?
So that one I multiplied by b.
Mm-hmm.
So I can still do that one.
By b? Yeah, that works. Right. For the second section on here, this was your no calculator part of your 4.1. This one was infinitely many. Some of you were putting the only solution is 3, but the only way that would be true is if this said x equals 3, which it does not. So 3 equals 3 or number equals the same number is infinitely many. 2 numbers that don't equal is no solution. Any of these are x equals whatever. So that was hit or miss. You either got that one right or you didn't. Questions on that one? Now, 10, you had to solve. So distribute first. So 8x plus 4 minus 2x equals 8 plus 4x plus 20. Distributing correctly was worth 1 point. Then you had a choice here. You could either combine like terms on the same side or start to solve it either or. So if you combine your like terms, that would be 6x plus 4 and 28 plus 4x. Then you needed to pick and choose what you wanted to move, get all the variables on one side, constants on the other. Many of you subtracted 4x. Make sure you're doing this to both sides. And subtract 4. Also, when you're subtracting your x's, make sure you have x's. So however you did that, as long as you get 2x and 24, or some of you got the negative version of that, which was fine. And then divide it to get 12. Do we have any questions on that one? For the most part, you guys did relatively well on this section, so give yourself a pat on the back, a round of applause. Good job on this page. The next page was more from us. For the calculator section of 4.1, After I figured out what your score was from this, I counted it, or I added it to the first section, and that became your total score. For number 1, you have to distribute. Some of you changed it to decimals, and that was fine since these were nice decimals. Some of you combined the let terms, some of you started moving, either or did not matter. And then same thing, get all your variables to one side, constants on the other. A lot of you moved this over and then got rid of the 7. Some of you directly simplified that, some of you didn't. Either or was fine, as long as you simplified it eventually. So this was 6 over 2x equals 18, which simplified to 3x. And then if we divided, we got x equals 6. Questions on that one? And then for the most part, we all got number 2 correctly. Cross multiply, whether you put them in parentheses or went to the next step, either or was fine. So this should have been 8n plus 64 equals 7n plus 70. So cross multiplying was worth 1 point. Solving was worth 1 point. A lot of you subtracted the 7n. And then subtracted the 64. If you did it the other way, that's okay too. To get n equals 6. And then your final answer was worth 1 point. Questions on that one? For objective 2, for number 3, we needed to get rid of the 7 first. And then either divide both sides by 1/3 or multiply both sides by 3. Either or, but not both. And then isolating the absolute value bars was worth 1 point. So if you were missing this at the end, you were losing points because you didn't show that you isolated it all the way. After you get here and realize you can continue solving, then you drop them and write 2 different equations. Many of you remember the 2 different equations, some of you did not. Some of you changed this to a plus. That's not how our absolute value worked because we dropped them, so it wouldn't become a positive. And then we would solve. And divide both sides by -1. If you had changed this to a plus, you were missing this step. So that x equals -23 and x equals a positive 31, and you would write that as a solution set. Least to greatest. So isolating the absolute value bars was 1 point. Setting up both equations was worth 2. Solving both of them correctly was worth 1, and then getting your final answer was worth 1. Do we have any questions on that one? For number 4, you should have started by isolating. Some of you stopped here, recognized that it's an absolute value, we can't have it equal a negative, and went on to say no solution, which was correct. Some of you kept solving this, but we should have stopped. We cannot solve it if it has a negative number. Now, you do need to show that you did isolate it, even though this would still be negative. So it would have been no solution regardless, but you do still need to show that part. Questions on that one? And then our word problems. So, as always, underline, circle, highlight anything that's important. So for number 5, $10 per day, plus a $20 one-time registration fee. We rented a bike and the total cost was $90. We have to write and solve an equation to find how many days you rented the bike for. So you need a variable to represent what you're looking for. Doesn't matter what that is. Some of you put per day, number of days. However, you just need to be specific. If you just put days, I don't really know what you're talking about. Your equation, $10 per day, the per and the D go together, so 10D plus 20, our total was 90. So writing your equation correctly was worth 1 point, and then your variable was worth 1 point. Solving your equation was worth 1 point. And then making sure you have your label with your answer was worth 1 point. So we should have had 7 days as our final answer. Do we have any questions on that one? Okay, for 6, most of us set 6 up correctly. This one was our length and width, our perimeter problem. So we know the length is 5 inches more than 4 times its width, so we need an equation for our length. You need to know your perimeter equation. This you didn't have to write, but if you needed it, P equals 2L plus 2W. Some of you put W plus L and it threw everything off. So make sure it's 2W plus 2L. Then put your L and your 90 in your equation. And then solve. Combine like terms. Get rid of the 10 by subtracting and divide. And then here our measurement was in inches. So make sure you put 8 inches. So finding W was worth 1 point, solving was worth 1 point. Finding your perimeter equation and putting all the pieces in was worth 1 point. Finding your length equation was worth 1 point. And then finding your length was worth 1 point. So length should have been 37 inches. Questions on that one? Are there any other general questions from the quiz, specific questions on the review that we didn't go over last time that we want to see go over, have questions about? Do we have any other last minute questions? Nature. So just find one, then you can choose one. So I know we did 14 last time, so any of these? or you want me to find some other ones? We have 5 and 6 here. For this number 6, so this was like the third page in the review if you were keeping track. We would need to isolate this first, get rid of the 7 by subtracting to the other side. Right now it looks like it might be no solution, but we have to isolate it completely before we can decide. Divide both sides by -2. This becomes a positive, and because it is positive, we can keep solving. So drop your absolute value signs. Set it equal to a positive and negative version. This is -5, okay? And then solve both. We have x equals 9 and x equals -1. And then write that as a solution set. Least to greatest. Other review questions? So the larger of two numbers is one more than 3 times the smaller number. So since it's talking about larger and smaller number, you can just call that L, call that S. You don't have to define them. This is specifically talking about the larger, so that's going to be L equals 1 more than 3 times the smaller number, so 1 plus 3S. We need to find the sum of the number, the sum of the numbers is 49. So if we were to add L plus S, we would get 49. So then we can take our L equation and put it into the other one. 1 plus 3S plus S equals 49. So we would combine 1 plus 4S equals 49. Solve for S. And divide. 12. Here you don't need labels because they're just talking about smaller number, larger number. And then you would put that back in. And solve for L. So L would be 37, S would be 12. Similar to the length and width problem, but length and width is 2L plus 2W for your perimeter. So keep those separate. Any other review questions? So I gave you all a binder tech piece of paper. If you need any of those papers, there are some in the crate. You just look in the solving folder and you can pull out any of those extras. Go ahead and get that together, and then I'm going to move some of you around